help us out with this. Why, after this election, will it not just be status quo and a form of politics focused on Germany's economy of the kind that we've seen in the past? What are your expectations?
So first of all, with regards to the expectations regarding what Annette already said, I think is spot on. We're likely going to see a three-party coalition, and it's probably going to take quite some time to form that coalition. Might even be something similar to 2017, where ultimately it took 172 days. And ultimately, it also means that, therefore, more extreme policy proposals will be watered down. What we would expect to see under pretty much any coalition coming out of this is that there will be a bigger regulatory, political, and fiscal focus on making Germany smarter, greener, and more digital. And that in turn also is important for investors, because certain sectors, think about renewables, semiconductors, automobiles leaning towards EVs, could well benefit. And more broadly, we think that the adoption of sustainable strategies by both institutional as well as private investors will continue.
What about the sectors that will do less well then in this environment?
So there's not really a big loser coming out from all of this, unless there's certain companies, and this is very specific, that do not want to adapt to the realities of a world that's focusing increasingly on climate change, on digitization, and an evolving regulatory as well as social environment. I think under certain extreme scenarios, one of the sectors will be a lot of focus on will be the real estate sector, especially if we were to see a more left-leaning coalition, which is clearly not our base case. Focus on regulation, rent break, etc., may well have a negative impact on that sector. But once again, that's not our base case.
Let me ask you about the point of execution on reaching those climate targets, because clearly the energy industry is really dying to hear from the next government what the rules are. Are you expecting this to happen quick and in a very business-friendly way?
So we think, given that it's the #1 focus from the German electorate, together with the pandemic, and therefore also is very high up on the policy priorities for most parties, there will have to be a relatively immediate focus on getting the clear standards and what to expect. We see that there's a difference in how to achieve those climate goals from all parties. On the one hand, we have the center-right, which is focusing more on market-based incentives, CO2 emissions trading schemes, for example. And on the other hand, we have the Greens that are focusing more on regulation, intervention, higher CO2 prices, and investment. And ultimately, also given all the various different coalitions that could be formed, we probably see a mix of those two. So higher CO2 prices and at the same time soaring investment on the green transformation. Very much in line again with the Fit for 55 plan set out at an EU level already.
Let me also ask you about taxes. Are you expecting like personal taxes and corporate taxes to rise with the next government?
We have again, it very much depends on what we get out here, but we have to be clear about this. Post-pandemic, taxes as a share of GDP will rise, not just in Germany. As it stands at the moment, the center-right, as usual, says there's not going to be an increase in the tax burden. The FDP, for example, says, and this should be in an unconditional way, the CDU-CSU links it more to the fiscal space. On the other hand, we see the Greens, for example, that are looking for increases in taxes to partly fund also some of these investments. So I think we have to be clear about this. We're probably going to see a rise in taxes, not on a corporate level, but more on a personal level. Wealth taxes is a very big issue, which is being discussed in Germany amongst investors as well as business owners. Here, given the staunch resistance from the FDP, CDU, CSU, but also practical matters. Remember in the 1990s when it was abolished as deemed unconstitutional in the way that it was calculated. We don't think it's going to return that quickly, if at all.